Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Radcliffe Institute, Harvard's Institute for Advanced Study. My name is Dan Carpenter. I'm the Freed Professor of Government in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, and I also serve as Director of Social Science Academic Ventures here at the Radcliffe Institute. Let me tell you a little bit about today's events. The Dean's Lecture Series at Radcliffe brings to the Institute leading thinkers in the sciences, the arts, the social sciences, and humanities. In Diana Taylor, today's guest, we are fortunate to have an individual who spans both the arts and the humanities and does so on both sides with distinction. Lecturers represent the very best in their fields, people who are leading the way in creative, boundary-pushing scholarship, policymaking, and art. Professor Taylor will be introduced today by Martin Puchner, Byron and Anita Wien, Professor of Drama and of English, and of Comparative Literature, and Chair of the Committee on Dramatics at Harvard. Professor Puchner is leading the effort to establish a new Harvard undergraduate concentration in theater, dance, and media, which is making its way through the many layers of approval in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences, but recently received approval from the Faculty Council on February 25th. With that, let me introduce or bring up to the podium, Professor Puchner. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure indeed to introduce Diana Taylor, university professor at New York University and associated with the departments of Performance Studies and Spanish. There are several reasons why Diana Taylor does not need an introduction here today, and one of them is that she's been coming to Harvard quite a bit. Just last year, for example, she gave an important lecture associated with the program in folklore and mythology. Today, she's giving the prestigious Dean's Lecture here at the Radcliffe Institute. And just in a few months, she will be giving a lecture and workshop at the Mellon School of Theater and Performance Research here. So this says several things. One, that you're very popular here, but I also want you to notice the variety of these institutions, folklore and mythology, theater and performance, and here the interdisciplinary Dean's Lecture that speaks both to the diversity of Diana Taylor's work, but also, to put it slightly differently, the fact that her work has had an impact on quite a number of different fields. For me personally, Diana Taylor has been an ambassador for the power of performance, the need for performance, and the importance of thinking about performance. She's written about Argentina's dirty war and the disappeared, nationalism and sexuality in the Americas, colonialism and decolonization, the work of women, acts of memory. Now, these topics are crucial for understanding any culture anywhere, and this is why many different kinds of disciplines have approached them and tackle them. What Diana Taylor has done is to demonstrate that again and again that this larger cultural and political conversation is incomplete if it does not include an acute attention to performance, how bodies move, how performances are marked by the past and open possibilities for the future, how they activate texts and exceed them, existing in the charged field between the archive and the repertoire, as one of her many books puts it so memorably. We're talking about performance in an expanded field. Diana Taylor might illuminate demonstrations by children of the disappeared, or she might introduce the work of a Peruvian theater troupe. Or again, she might talk about the televised astrology readings by Univision personality Walter Mercado, or talk with incisive precision about responses to 9/11. This work has been widely read. It is celebrated with awards such as the Joey Calloway Prize for Best Book on Drama, or the Outstanding Book Award of the Association for Theater in Higher Education. They've been anthologized, including in the Performance Studies Reader. In other words, they've been canonized, just as Diana Taylor herself has canonized the work of the performance artists and writers she cares most passionately about, for example, in the influential anthology on Latin American theater and performance stages of conflict. Diana Taylor understands the power of the archive and how to get into the repertoire. There's one other thing I want to mention, and that is institution building, because that's work that's often unrequited and is a lot of work, as we all know. And here, well, in a way, a lot of Diana Taylor's work can be described as making a large argument about what she calls a hemispheric perspective. In 2003, she wrote, "Now is the time for remapping the Americas," and that's precisely what she has done, not only through her scholarly work, her anthologies, her teaching, but also by creating the Hemispheric Institute, which you all know. It's an incredibly important, inventive, and innovative institute that brings together scholarship and art. And this is, of course, one of the things that we at Harvard right now are trying to figure out, for example, through the new concentration in theater, dance, and media. And here's and many other things, we have much to learn from Diana Taylor, which is why we keep inviting her back. Today, she will guide us through Sao Paulo's phantasmagoric and labyrinthine world of things. Diana, thank you very much for coming again. Please take us into the labyrinth.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Dean Cohen of Radcliffe Institute and Dan Carpenter, Martin, of course, Rebecca Wasserman, and Paul Bernan for making this such a wonderful event. So today I'm going to talk to you about the labyrinth of things. I just need to see if I have a, yes, I have a Gidgee. Okay, great. Great. So I'm going to start with a quote from a Portuguese poem that's called Trash at Dawn. It seems as if culture consists in deeply martyring matter and pushing it through a relentless gut. It's a consolation to think that not even excrement can be forced to leave the planet. So this epigraph suggests that matter, although martyred by constant change and transformation, resists disappearance. This tension between shapeshifting and durability goes to the crux of, and even extends my thinking about archives, repertoires, and digital systems of transmission, about what circulates, what we presume remains, and what we assume disappears from culture. Since the archon served as the place where official documents were filed and stored in ancient Greece, the archive has been synonymous with governmental order, literally cementing the mandate for preservation and access, albeit restricted, of certain materials. Western societies have privileged the archives with myths of neutrality and stability and endurance, as if things in them don't change, as if things not in them have no staying power. Clearly, many subversive and anti-government materials have been preserved in archives. The archives of the Inquisition hold much of what we know about 17th century practices in Mexico, for example, including the non-normative sexual practices listed as sins and perversions. But my point goes more to the observation posited in the opening epigraph. It's actually hard to get rid of things. Perhaps we could question the politics of visibility that disappears the ongoingness of practices, peoples, and things not destined for the archive. When we look around us at everything from teeming cities, we recognize, from teeming cities full of people to all the discards that refuse to evaporate from city dumps, we recognize that things do not, in fact, disappear. They exist in a constant state of transformation and againness. That observation might alter how we think of things. In a recent article entitled Save As, the Archive in the Age of Digital Technologies, I defined the archive as simultaneously an authorized place, the physical or digital site housing collections, a thing/object or collection of things, the historical records or unique representative objects marked for inclusion, and a practice, the logic of selection, organization, access, and preservation over time that deems certain objects archivable. Place, object, practice function in mutually sustaining ways. The object is nameable, storable, and preservable, imbued with the power and authority, perhaps even aura, of both place and selection. We know the thing is important because it has been elected for preservation in the archive. It does not matter whether the object was meant to be saved. Carbon copies of letters and even daily newspapers or handouts at a protest take on a special status in the archive. In turn, notions of historical accuracy, of authenticity, authorship, property, including, of course, copyright. Hold on, I'm using this little thing, which is not the best. Specialized knowledge, expertise, and cultural relevance, even truth, are underwritten by faith in the object found in the archive. This circular legitimating system again affirms the centrality of place. Place-object practice exists in a tightly bound connection in which each relies on the other for its authority. In that essay, I use things and objects twice in conjunction, not as interchangeable, as I know they are not, but connected with a slash. Thingness as an object first took me to the archive. Now thingness as a practice unexpectedly took me back to performance. Teatro de Vertigem's Bom Retiro. Bom Retiro, 958 meters, leads us on a walk through Sao Paulo's phantasmagoric world of things. Things in this performance revolve around fabric. Things such as dresses and fine cloths sold in shopping malls. Things such as the homeless people's blankets and torn wedding gowns. Things such as remnants of cloth and used clothing tossed in garbage cans and containers. Things in their devolving states of glory, comfort, disuse, and decomposition. Teatro de Vertigem, directed by Antonio Araújo, gradually introduces us into a deeply disturbing experience. We hold on by a proverbial thread that leads through this examination of materiality, the thingness of cloth, its history, politics, the people that make it, and the people that it makes. After gathering at the Osvaldo Andrade Cultural Center in the immigrant working class neighborhood of Bom Retiro, spectators are handed a map with instructions to the meeting place. Turn left after leaving the building, cross Lubavitch Street, and go down 4 more blocks, and then turn left before arriving at our destination, 259 Professor Cesare Lombroso Street. As we stand in front of a shopping mall, closed shut, the buildings and the street names, I figure, tell us part of the history. The early Jewish immigration to this neighborhood, Sao Paulo's equivalent of New York Lower East Side. Osvaldo Andrade, the great Brazilian modernist poet and playwright of the early 20th century, argued in his Manifesto Antropofágico, the Cannibal Manifesto, that cultures remain strong by eating and digesting others. Quote, only cannibalism unites us. Socially, economically, philosophically. Lombroso, the 19th century Italian-born criminologist and eugenicist, stated that criminality was passed down through generations and could be recognized through physiognomy. The locations themselves then subtly reveal terrifying theories of transmission, cemented into the very geography of place and practice. Shop signs in Korean tell of new waves of immigrants that mostly replace the now well-off Jews who moved off to better residential areas. The ultra-Orthodox and Hasidic Jews stayed behind. Bolivians, now working for the Koreans, are the new lowest of the low. The neighborhood, the names, the signs, the remnants of cloth suggest that this is a state of constant change, transition, circulation, absorption, and regurgitation. The evening streets are eerily empty. 60 to 80 people can attend a performance. It's dark, and we wind our way in groups of 2s and 3s through the uneven sidewalks of narrow streets. The shops are shuttered closed at this time of night. Garbage bags tilt against streetlights at each corner. Where are we going? See if I can make this work. Yeah. The unknown, dark, eerie landscape already feels like part of the performance. I notice various pieces of fabric bursting out of garbage cans. There are things left over from other things, dresses, pants, jackets. Walking further, I detect something strange about the streetlines. Did Araujo really alter them? I'm concerned about an elderly woman who walks beside me, an artist from Mexico I had met previously. I worry for her on the treacherous sidewalks and hold onto her arm. What if she falls and breaks something? Is vertigem liable? Life is risky. Walking down the street is risky. But still, is this a part of the performance? I stop to look at something written on the wall. Is that part of the performance? Everything takes on a new intentionality. All the random bits and pieces of everyday life seem aligned or assembled in a special order, inviting us to decipher them. When I turn back to walk, the old woman has gone. I see her ahead of me, single-mindedly moving towards the performance site. Finally, everyone converges at the designated place. The street is dim and desolate. There's not much happening, really, except a woman sitting in a chair in front of a shuttered, indistinct shopping mall, listening to the radio. All we hear is the crackle of the static. Suddenly, workers delivering boxes of merchandise come crashing down the street. Bestias de cargo, or beasts of burden, the text calls them. Soon, shoppers carrying large bags join them, hammering the door to get in. They all line up and pause in front of the large metallic door that covers the shopping mall before pushing it open. That pause, a tableau vivant, captures the anticipation of the before and after, that all-powerful moment of exchange of goods in capitalism. Suddenly, gloriously, the lights from the mall spills over us like daybreak. Sonorous rumblings herald us inside. We have been inaugurated into the temple of things. Everything is alive. The lights and music pulsate like heartbeats. An invisible hand guides us deeper and deeper into the dark maze of the shopping mall. We have entered into the belly of the monster. The next 2 hours, spectators experience the vertiginous pull and push of things. I say things instead of objects because object suggests a degree of phenomenological stability. A chair is a chair. You can label a chair and put it in the archive. Objects, according to W.J.T. Mitchell, are the way things appear to the subject. End quote. They are nameable, categorizable. Things, on the other hand, are more ambiguous. They conjure up process, transformation, and substitutability. The chair thing is a tree, wood, planks, splinters, junk, a weapon or instrument, firewood, but it can also be the memory of my home and almost anything else we can imagine. Bill Brown notes that the word thing indexes a certain limit or liminality to hover over the threshold between the nameable and the unnameable, the figurable and the unfigurable, the identifiable and the unidentifiable. I can use thing to speak of another thing. One thing leads to another. So here too, spectators participate in a journey that follows the logic of things. As we enter one area, it magically lights up. The space seems full of wonder, and I look around like an aging Miranda in this strange new environment. It glitters. The things in it glitter. Who is pulling the strings? But as the audience members begin to move through the shadowy environment, I notice that it's shabby. The tawdry things in the wannabe upscale shopping mall take on a sudden luminance, then fade. Again, I'm confused about what is part of the performance and what is not. Does this mall function during the day as a real mall, or is it a set for the performance? Are those things in the display windows real merchandise? Does the performance stand in for the real, or add another level of practice and another lens for perception? I try to resist the temptation to move you through the performance and the spectacular ways in which Araujo conjures up the magical world of things in capitalism. I gave up. Walking through the performance entails its own way of knowing, and the beauty and brilliance of Bom Retiro performs its own analysis of the desperation of a population subjugated to things. As things cannot be understood phenomenologically, there is no such thing as a thing, they need to be understood in context and practice. Is the piece of cloth a coveted shawl or a discard? This is not the theatricalizing of archivation, as in Derrida's word, but its opposite, the shape shifting that exceeds the archive but is not quite the repertorial live. The only way I could start thinking about the complexities the performance opens up was by moving through it. Here I will retrace my steps to offer my own process of analysis as a spectator. Having been sucked into this familiar space, a mall, in the strangest of ways, we follow a lone woman. She stops at an illuminated shop to stare at a red dress. It clearly obsesses her. The stores are always closed, the consumidora complains. You have to get here earlier, a lot earlier. You should sleep here, the red dress replies. Lights in the shop pulse. Audience members squeeze to the next place to look at the action. I begin to feel the stress of constant vigilance, the relentless one-day thrust of the seemingly chaotic performance makes me feel as if I'm being pushed to a rhythm that contracts and releases. The combination of being on guard and pushed forward puts me in a state of tunnel vision. I scan the environment to assess the risks and prioritize what to focus on. Where is that old woman? Ghostly mannequins line the passageways. One holding a Gran Promoción sign seems alive. She is alive. As the corridor lights up ahead, the one behind goes dark. The experience is not frightening, really, but it's bewildering. It conjures up the environment of terror I have lived since 9/11, the mandate to stay alert, coupled with the confusion of not knowing what is real or dangerous or threatening and what isn't. If you see something, say something. The ubiquitous mass transit warnings of the New York area. Is terror a relatively new phenomenon, a US import like some of the things in the store? Or do I carry it now with me wherever I go? It's hard to gauge what matters and what doesn't, to know what to look at or what I've missed. After some time, I notice that anonymous ninja-like humans, clad head to toe in fabric, move both the lighting and sound systems along with us. They manage our environment, silently and invisibly transforming it. The invisibilization of labor and capital, performed by those shrouded figures. It's not clear that they're always the same humans, but they, like the mannequins, look the same and function interchangeably. Everything around us is animated but not necessarily alive. The shadow figures, like seemingly all else here, are governed by the capitalist logic of things as substitutable, discardable, and replaceable, as opposite to archives that consider objects as unique and worthy of preservation. Humans are only partially awake. Things, mannequins, are not dead any more than the shadow figures are truly alive. Instead of a brave new world, we've entered into a whole new world, now sung by the Faxineira Filosófica, the Afro-Brazilian cleaning woman. She sings about the new as she recycles the Disney song and dusts off the sign that reads doping center instead of shopping center. The female African descendant continues to clean. Where have I seen this before? The slave trade gave rise to a complex network of relations, all sustained on and through the body that could be thingified and sold. Slavery, the savage violence of exchange, constitutes the inaugural act of capitalism, which grew out of the trade in humans. Terror, to answer my earlier reflection, has always been the underside of capitalism, and the trade in cotton textiles specifically sustained the circular system in which, quote, the product of Italian weavers paid for slaves in Africa to work on plantations in the Americas to produce agricultural commodities for European consumers, as your colleague Sven Berkut wrote in The Empire of Cotton. A defective male mannequin that you can see here, manufactured in Korea, finds it hard to believe she's not as gorgeous as those on display. Trash, they call her. She's nothing but trash. Most shop windows on our journey are dark and shut tight, but once in a while we see something inside the shops. Bolivian women working through the night, sewing the red dress that other women will wear. The thingification of humans, especially of women, Vertigem proposes, continues long after slavery has been officially eradicated. A female actor plays Radio Infinita, the radio that never sleeps for workers who never sleep. The radio is a person thing. Her eyes are transistors, antennae pop up from her head. But she is live, but certainly not alive, offering 50% off sales, talking to this world of dreams, sponsored by clonazepam, the manufacturer of sleeping pills. Yet Radio Infinita's announcements also carry terror alerts. We hear that the recent attacks are being investigated and those responsible punished. The terror presumably leads to more shopping therapy and a greater demand for sleeping pills. A negocio redondo, as we call it in Mexico, so it's a full circle of business. In the corridors, a delivery man fondles a female mannequin. At times, the audience follows behind a happy group of shoppers running towards a fire exit. An errante, a disruptive terrorist figure, intervenes at different moments. At this point in the action, an enormous floor-to-ceiling banner goes up in flames. He goes running off. What I see is stunningly beautiful and utterly depressing at the same time. I'm trapped in a system or a machine or an organism that I cannot assess, but that pushes me along. The experience has no outside, no external place that Derrida attributes to archives, no place from which to name and categorize the rush of things that engulf and move us. We move through haunted spaces of circulation and exchange, an empty mall full of wants and longings. Desire transports us to a space of imagined future being or having. Want steals our present. What gets preserved in the world is not the object, but the desire to own. A character in the play tells us that we're in the realm of the Buktronik, a devil of things without owners, originally a malevolent, clinging character from Jewish mythology. If anything, things own us and make us one of them. one more thing among things. The living model has now been marked down again. She is now 30% off. Many cultures believe that things have a life of their own. The Mayans, both ancient and contemporary, have a word, chulel, for the animation in all things, human and non-human. Chulel refers to the life in everything, its grandeur. This differs radically from the shopping mall, in which humans and everything else have become deadened. Their chulel, the Mayans might say, has been stolen or broken. People become lifeless things like mannequins. Capitalist exigencies and lack of opportunity push people from place to place. Like migrants, people here are broken down to body parts, arms and backs to pick the grapes or push the baby carriages. They are interchangeable and disposable. Racism, violence against women, and generalized doping further dehumanize. We are all displaced, this performance suggests, as it takes us on a tour of the underside of things. The performance further underscores this by using some 30 or so actors to play the hundreds of figures and shadows that populate this universe. Everyone, quite literally, is always morphing into something or someone else. Our journey through the maze is interrupted by bangs and screams. The drug-addicted homeless population outside the mall beats on the metal gates, demanding to be let in. Again, Araujo stages the tableau vivant at the locked entrance to the mall. The addicts, with blankets thrown over their shoulders to keep them warm, pose as mirror images of the consumers and delivery people at the beginning of the performance. They too belong to the crazed world of demand and supply. Theirs is a universe of rocks, pedra, crack. I am also a person, pleads the cracómano, trying to sell stuff to the shoppers and audience. His small pedra is his, all he has. In Cracolandia, that's really what they call Crackland in Sao Paulo, things have a life of their own. The rock talks back to the addict. Throughout the performance, it gets larger and takes up more space. The addict might hold the rock at the beginning, but by the end, he belongs to the rock. These mirror images, the mall and Cracolandia, illustrate the degree to which people live in interconnected economies, the violence outside and the privatized violence inside the gates, though those connections are often obscured. But again, a rush of activity makes it impossible to hold on to a reflection. All of a sudden, a crowd of consumers overtakes us. They rip off their old clothes and throw them to the floor. They rush out of the building, euphoric with their new acquisitions, trampling over all the cloth on the ground. The audience, too, walks over the discarded fabric on the way out. Fabric has a complicated history. I look down where I'm stepping. The blankets over the shoulders of the crack addicts, like the blankets on the shoulders of survivors of concentration camps, reminds us that there's a politics to cloth, an economy, a social performance of value and status. Disappeared people in Peru have been identified through small remnants of clothing. I follow them out of the mall, walking on the textiles, and I feel I'm being asked to witness another kind of violence and disappearance. We follow the shoppers, the homeless, and other members of the audience out of the mall and into the dark passageway between buildings. Despite our many differences, for a moment, we're all the same. We are all the people who move through spaces that don't belong to us, transitional spaces that don't belong to anyone. The move to the dark outside is far less noticeable than the initial entry into the mall. Even though the shadow figures accompany us, there is no music, no glorious light, just the sound of a train passing very close by. Did Araujo plan that? The performance consists of interconnected threads, acts, themes, characters, colors, sounds, and images that repeat in different patterns throughout the piece. The outside resembles the inside far more than we might have anticipated. The nodes, high points, undersides, flashes, poses are all there, redistributed. Radio Infinita continues speaking. Terror continues to threaten our dreams. Distractions interrupt our knowing. Looking up at the dark windows of the silent buildings, we see the silhouettes of women sewing at their machines. A bride in a crumpled wedding dress appears standing on a high, narrow ledge of wall. She's lost, she tells us. She was looking for a store and doesn't know how she got trapped on that ledge or how to get off. Now the shadowy figures move all their equipment on carts as they run in front of us or beside us. The consumidora wanders in the street, homeless now too, looking for the closed shop with the red dress. Audience members walk by smashed mannequins and other refuse that lies abandoned on the sidewalks. The shadowy figures push female mannequins down the streets in carts and glass boxes. Thingmobiles, women as objects on display, en route to disintegrating into things. As we approach a crowded city avenue, two women notice that they're wearing the same red outfit. In rage, they claw and rip at each other until they're both stark naked. The women stop and look at each other again, jump into each other's arms and kiss. But this is not a passionate kiss. They are joined not by desire, but by the thread that links us all. It's literally unraveling between their mouths. Unraveling from their mouths as they back away from one another. A bus passes by with curious passengers peering out of the windows. Did Araujo stage that? It's a real bus. Those are real people. I assure myself, aware of how foolish I sound, even to myself. Further down the street, young, arrogant models strut down a runway, showing off their designer clothing. We're in the middle of an avenue in Sao Paulo. Without seeming to pay attention, they expertly dodge buses, cars, and bicycles as they sashay back and forth, trampling the antique indigenous weavings that serve as the carpet under their feet. The city, too, is a protagonist, a living organism. Only now am I beginning to grasp the scale of the performance. Everything happens at the same time. We hear airplanes, trains, buses, and everything becomes part of something else, and not least the performance we're a part of. We're in traffic, not just street traffic, but also the traffic in drugs, in women, in undocumented labor, pirate radio, the traffic in dreams and desires. Everything, like the cloth, is in the process of decomposition, recomposition, and being discarded. We're part of the performance of transformation and transmutation, the cannibalism of capitalism that unites us. Desire, as part of the process, moves things along. In this dream world, it appears that the inexorable process will lead to the acquisition of the ideal thing, rather than to death. A before-after ad shows a fat man as before and a smiling slim man after. The errante surreptitiously replaces the image of the slim man with one of a cadaver. Desire does not lead us where we think we are going. A bike pulls a cart in which a naked delivery man is now fucking his beloved mannequin. We keep walking down the city streets, crossing avenues and catching sight of things that may or may not have been designed for the performance. After a while, it doesn't matter, I think. It's a co-production. Antonio Araujo, Vertigem, and the city of Sao Paulo. Audience members try to be attentive to each other. Although we're part of the experience, we're also atomized. We can't really walk together. The performance pulls us this way and that. Shadow figures moving the sound and lighting equipment shove past us. Consumers rush through the corridors in the mall and then on the streets as we watch for cars and buses. The sound of the subway makes us turn. In short, we're part of the frenzy. We too are pushed by desire, our desire to see and experience and make sense of this environment that looks so foreign and familiar at the same time. Even though the actions, sounds, and lighting position everyone so we can get a better look, we are always part of the show, moving in it and through it. While Vertigem creates astonishing images, I would argue that this is not a performance that foregrounds the image. Rather, it's about the image-making society that the board writes about, the society of the spectacle in which the social relations among people is mediated by images. The breathtaking tableau capture the thing for a second, display it in a light box so we can see it, then releases it again into the crash of circulation. We will never see it the same way again. While we rush to get a glimpse of something, our inner board chides us for being enthralled by images. Yes, says our inner Heraclitus, but even these are never the same twice. We crane our necks trying to see what's just outside the frame of vision. There is no privileged spectator in this performance. The image-making machine is way beyond our control. No frame or stage or archive could contain it. It has too many moving parts. As we walk on, some locals lean out of their windows, looking at their street made strange, knowing that for a moment they too form part of the performance. They look at us, amusing objects of their gaze. I look up at them, looking at me. Again, I am overwhelmed by a sense of risk, seemingly unprotected in the street now, following the actors and focusing on the action. There's a lot to look out for. Something could happen. The bride appears, trapped on another ledge this time. The startling beauty of the tableau makes me forget the vulnerability of looking up and around, even as I walk down the city street. The crack addict moves his pedra, now growing increasingly unwieldy. At one moment, he shouts out, "I don't want to hear about obligatory internment," in reference to a law that had passed in Brazil in early 2013, requiring internment and rehabilitation for addicts. The light and sound cues prompt us to stop and start. The living model, now 60%, now 90% off, stands in the middle of the street. Without a word, we are pressed to keep moving. We only move one way, forward, without a sense of progress. When we stop in front of a multi-storied building, my spectator clock tells me we're approaching the end. We stand facing the building's multi-storied glass facade. Each window is a mini stage. People move inside, things happen. I now feel like a consumer at a peep show, when just a few blocks back, I felt like an amusing object for the locals looking out of their windows. Object, viewing subject, consumer, critic, amazed audience member, cautious pedestrian, all describe certain watching and looking experiences I've had during the evening. But now we've stopped moving and we're looking up at the large multi-set stage of sorts. So I expect the performance to end. Some culminating scene will make all the threads evident and it will be over. Then the doors open and the woman from the beginning of the performance ushers us into a large foyer of a building in disrepair. We sit on the stairs looking forward, like in a traditional audience. Photocopies of old Yiddish theater flyers litter the stairs. Some of the characters appear. There's the Fraccioneta Filosofica again, cleaning as ever. We sit and wait. Is this the end? After everyone is congregated, guides lead us downstairs to a very large, completely disintegrated theater. People in wheelchairs, Araujo tells me later, are carried down. We enter into the world of red. It's dark and everyone is careful as they look and feel for a place to sit. The red plush velvet of the seats remind us that this was once a place with aspirations of its own. In its prime, the theater was part of a Jewish cultural center, a stronghold of the resistance to the dictatorship. Now, in disrepair, people have forgotten about it. The consumidora continues her search for the red dress. Suddenly, the room is full of shadow figures in red dresses, their faces covered in red cloth. They ceremoniously embrace her, put the dress on her, cover her face, and welcome her into the deadened world of things. As in the mall, an enormous piece of fabric goes up in flames. The addict comes back, now melded with his rock. It's one of my organs, one of my limbs, he yells. Only surgery can separate us. The audience is invited upstairs. Throughout the entire performance, everything moves and circulates. Again, I think of the risk and watch my step. The stairs are so rickety. I wonder how the older artist from Mexico is getting on. At the same time, the beauty, the images Araujo composes fill me with awe. Standing on stage, looking back through the theater, we see the exquisite tableau. 3 Bolivian women continue to sew the fabric, each isolated in her circle of momentary light and visibility. We are united in our atomization. Perhaps this is the exact opposite of the chulel. Certainly this must be the end of the performance. It's not that I want the performance to end. I'm completely caught up in it, but it feels as if the movement and circulation will lead to closure. The rhythm of the piece itself seems to demand a full stop. But no, as soon as I formulate the thought, chaos breaks out again. Agentes sanitarios come into the theater with their long brushes and disinfectants. The space fills with sounds and clashes and thumping and yelling. Atención, do not panic, evacuate the area. The sound of sirens and alarms punctuate the words coming from loudspeakers. The audience is unceremoniously expelled as workers hose down the floor around our feet. We, like things, are put through the process of circulation and disgorged at the end. We've been pushed through the gut of the beast and expelled. Let's be polite and say we've been regurgitated. The sanitation crew cleans up behind us. On the street, immediately in front of us, we see a large dumpster filled with the broken figures we've come to know throughout. The living model, now 100% off. So there too is the defective model and the fraccioneta filosofica. It's painful to see the women lying broken, undone by the endless violence of thingification. If they were just things, I think. The defective mannequin continues to chat away happily about things, coisas, although her limbs are askew. These dismembered bodies do not comprise a corpus. The assemblage points to the differences between a dumpster of trash and an archive. A corpus is a well-defined, categorized body of work, each piece organized and understood in relation to the others. The trash pile is the site of human decomposition. As we all walk past them, the large crew begins to gather on the street, ready to take their bow. They thank Petrobras, Brazil's petroleum company, for the financial support they need to produce this play. By law, Petrobras is and has the last word. But behind us, the woman from the beginning of the play looks at us enigmatically. Is this really the end? The Ardent posts a banner announcing one more fire sale. Capitalism never ends. We all disperse into the night. Going back the next day in daylight, I see many of the same elements I remember from the performance. Yes, the mall functions and the stores are now open for business, as usual, most of them selling knockoff designs of something in fashion, who knows where. Homeless people line the sidewalks. Some of them pull carts full of their personal belongings. I realize that the Forgotten Theater at the end sits right around the corner from the Osvaldo de Andrade Center where we had started. We had come round full circle. There was no destination, no ending, just circulation, transmission, regurgitation. By the end of the performance, my theory of things and archives and my sense of self as subject, object, product of late capitalism had been churned through the belly of the monster and came out different. Thank you.